Welcome to the second ITALO webinar. The aim of the Improving Transparency around Linkage Outputs group is to promote clarity in the reporting of data linkage outputs to help users make informed analyses. We are supported by DARE UK, which is managed by HDR UK. So following on from the previous webinar on creating address-based linkages, this session is moving downstream to hear from researchers using address-based linkages. So I'm very happy to welcome Anna from the University of Liverpool and Rodri from Swansea University. As with last time, what we'll do is we'll come to questions and discussions after both of our speakers have given their presentations. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Anna.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me and for the introduction. I'm Anna Head. I'm a research fellow from the University of Liverpool. Today I'm mainly presenting on behalf of the Grove project, but also lots of other connected work. So my talk will sort of have a little bit of background on like why place and health and why household level and what Grove is aiming to do, some sort of background to our setting and data, some projects we have ongoing, and then some challenges and reflections. So this work and these examples are a compilation and combination of a huge amount of work from like lots of different ongoing projects. So the slide on the screen is mainly the Grove project, and there's a whole range of expertise there, but there's also lots of other projects such as Groundswell, and a huge thank you also goes to our NHS colleagues from across different levels for the work in making this possible. I'd also add a disclaimer here that I will describe myself as an applied health researcher, i.e. I'm someone who uses lots of work that other smart people put together that I don't really understand. So I'm not an expert in a lot of these things like information governance, data linkage algorithms, data engineering. I know there's some NHS England colleagues on the call, and I apologise if I butcher descriptions of some of the things that you do. So just disclaimer out the way first. So why place and health? So we know that where we live affects our health and well-being and our likelihood of developing poor health, and that comes from lots of different aspects of place, so not just air pollution, but all sorts of different things, and that these are often distributed unequally within our neighbourhoods. So what we might have traditionally done in epidemiological analyses would be to use neighbourhood level or LSOA level metrics that are around 1,500 people, but because these environmental factors are unequally distributed, these area level analyses hide household level effects. So ecological fallacy essentially, and the analyses at area level don't allow us to look at household level interventions. So that's really why we think it's really important, and I'm sure everyone else here does, to be able to link environmental metrics, so things about the places we live in at household level, to health data in a safe and a secure way. And that's the aim of the Grove project, and it does this through various different ways. And Grove stands for, don't know why, but it stands for Governance for Household Level Environment and Health Data. And also I just add here that a lot of what we're working with builds on work that has happened in lots of other places like the SaIL data bank in Wales or DataLook in Scotland, or some of the longitudinal cohort studies in England. But maybe contextually it's important to say that with NHS England data, this massively increases the size, and that increases complexity, as does the number of different aspects of place-based data that you might want to bring in. And that's sort of some of the things that Grove is thinking about. So our work is mainly centred in Cheshire and Merseyside in the northwest of England. So it covers around 2.7 million individuals and just over 1 million unique households. The data we have is pseudonymised administrative healthcare data for our ICB region. So that includes primary care, secondary care, mental health services, mortality, and now we have this new UPRN data set, and we access our data through a secure data environment. So the UPRN linkage that we are using, so how we get from addresses to link to UPRNs, is provided by NHS England. It's a commissioned data set and is available nationally. So the QR code should take you to the website where you can read about the dataset. So we're using the linkage that someone else has kindly put together, which we're really grateful for. This complicated, small and hard to read diagram hopefully is appropriate for the complexity of what I understand is the process, but I might be wrong. So this linkage of addresses to UPRNs was done by NHS England and is based on the Personal Demographic Service. And essentially it's sort of been done in 3 phases. So initially, this was probabilistic matching of addresses to UPRNs using a proprietary tool. And then now whenever you update your address, this should there is some deterministic matching as soon as an address is updated, and then anything that doesn't get matched there is some retrospective probabilistic matching to different sources as well. And then the UPRNs are pseudonymized, similar to the residential anonymized linkage field in SAIL. And this gets provided to ICBs and people who want to use the data through these secure data environments. And I'd just add here that the CEDO UPRNs that we have are for most recent address only. So the UPRN dataset comes with several additional fields alongside the CEDO NHS number and CEDO UPRNs. So these come from different sources. So some of them are derived fields, for example, the number of people in the household, the type of residence, whether the patient is potentially a temporary resident or homeless. And there's also some additional linked data that comes from different sources. So for example, rural urban classification, some sort of household and property classifications, as well as information from energy performance certificates. And then in addition to this, once we have the UPRN linkage field, we can obviously add in other UPRN datasets, such as distance to green space or fast food outlets, or measures of greenness, or other household level data, such as housing improvements, which takes me on to some of the examples we're working on in Cheshire and Merseyside. So our Green Space and Asthma project came out of conversations with public health colleagues from Wirral Council, and they're particularly interested in using longitudinal data analysis in evidencing the impact of a lot of the regeneration work that's happening in their area, to try and unpick what is happening or isn't happening to reduce inequalities within the region. And they highlighted 5 key health outcomes that they were interested in, and so that led to this this piece of work around green space and asthma. So they're interested in the type of exposure to green and blue spaces within an urban environment and how this is associated with asthma. So we are looking at different exposures of green and blue space. So at the moment we have distance to local green space, enhanced vegetation index, a tree canopy measure, and we're looking to add distance to blue space. And all these are calculated and linked at the UPRN level. And the outcome of interest for this analysis is asthma prevalence. So I should say that these 2 projects are already in progress, so I don't have any results. And then the second example is from an NIHR first evaluation project, looking at evaluating the health impacts of government-funded housing retrofit programs in the Liverpool City region. And for this project, the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority Housing Team provided us with their data on the retrofits that they delivered between 2021 and 2024, which was about 5,500 homes. And the data they provided include the installed measures, so like solar panels, or whether it was wall insulation, when the installation was done, the EPC ratings before and after, and the cost of these measures installed. And these were linked at UPRN level to health data, which we're going to be using in sort of a quasi-experimental analysis to look at the impact of the retrofit on health conditions, subsequent healthcare use, and value for money. So these are just 2 quick examples of like the sorts of projects we're using UPRN metrics in. And so a few sort of challenges or reflections that I've had, and these are mainly based on my experience so far and conversations we've had within our team. So it'd be great to hear other people's thoughts or pushbacks or solutions on these. If you might not think these are problems. So the first one really is around information governance. And maybe there's lots of things to think through here. So essentially big data comes with big risks. And lots of our discussions are around balancing the 5 safes of safe data, safe projects, safe people, safe settings, and safe outputs when we're working within trusted research environments. So we've got, I guess there's lots of different ways of approaching this. So one is at the moment, when we ask for data to be linked at UPRN level, is making sure that the data that we want to link isn't disclosive at all. So there's no unique combinations of things that we're bringing in. The example my colleague always gives is if you're looking at the distance to blue space and you have somebody living in a lighthouse, that's probably only one person who has 0 meters distance to blue space. So you're automatically identifying that person if you're bringing that data in. A second approach is some colleagues are doing work around some clever geospatial matrices that maintain the ability to conduct spatially aware analyses whilst maintaining privacy of location, even if the data is accidentally leaked. And then thirdly, like infrastructure, things like data shield, where the analysis gets sent to the data and the analyst never sees the environment and health data together. I'd also add here maybe that the 2 projects I've highlighted are predominantly focused on single exposures or single types of exposures, but obviously the more different exposures you have linked to a set of health data, the more potentially disclosive. And whilst this is an information governance challenge, it's also a practical one, because for an analyst, you're essentially having to choose what you want to prioritize in terms of, is it accuracy of distance? Is it the amount of records that you have? Or would you rather have fewer metrics if that means that you can have more people included? So the green space example that I gave, at the moment, we only have 3 metrics linked, and we're discussing whether to bring in the blue space metric. But if we brought that in at the moment, we would have to suppress around 10% of our records. So we're just thinking about that. And I guess one of the things that gets highlighted within our group when we're thinking about environmental data is that because place information is widely available, there's this risk of large-scale disclosure and the speed of which de-anonymization could occur. And linked to this, I guess, is around, we obviously have a very important open science movement. There's a push to making things as open as possible. But if our UPRN level data on, say, distance to green space are made openly available at UPRN level, then obviously it's problematic to have exactly that same data both inside and outside of a trusted research environment. So the next sort of set of things that we've been thinking about links to in last month's seminar, both Mike and Robin talked through tools for probabilistic matching for address-based linkage, and they talked about different metadata fields they had on match scores and accuracy, and there was a discussion on what might be most appropriate in terms of like your cutoffs and how this depends on the project. And I guess my reflection here is that obviously there's a lot of nuanced information in these metadata, particularly as, like I said, the national UPRN data set we're using has 3 different match sources. We don't have a lot of information on exactly what they mean for different things. So working out exactly what is best for a project can be quite hard, for me at least. There's lots of different things to consider. So maybe that's an additional thing to take into account. We've also found within Cheshire and Merseyside that there are inequalities in the linkage quality characteristics for the probabilistic matching we have. So overall, around 57% of all linkages have a match score of 100, so that's perfect. There's no changes were needed to make the match. And 74% had a match score of at least 95, so only 1 or 2 characters were changed. But if we compare the most to the least deprived decile of IMD. Among the most deprived, only 43% were perfectly matched, compared to around 70% in the least deprived. So that's like another thing that we might want to think about. And then the next sort of set of considerations is that in our context and the data that we have, what we have is a matched UPRN based on the most recently updated address in the GP record. And we probably all have experience of our GP records not having our current address. Like, certainly for me, telling my GP that I've moved is not the first thing I do when I move house, unless I have a specific reason. And this is really what makes it tricky, is that there's a systematic bias in when addresses get updated. So maybe a classic example of this is like students who register when they move to university, and then they don't update their address until years after they've moved, if at all, because they haven't had any need, or because they've moved somewhere that's outside of NHS England's like update reach. And then the second related issue to that is that, unlike maybe in some of the longitudinal cohort studies, at the moment we don't have a longitudinal UPRN linkage, so we can't see people's exposure over time. We don't know how long someone has been living at their current address. And this is really limiting, particularly when we want to evaluate things like place-based regeneration projects. So do they actually improve the health of the people who live there and who have lived there for the last 10 years? Or are what seem to be population health benefits just a product of gentrification? So people being priced out and healthier, wealthier people moving in. And without being able to see where people have lived over time, we can't really explore this kind of thing at all. And then finally, I've sort of touched on some dataset specific challenges. So for the Green Space project, each time we add in a new green blue space metric, it increases the amount of records we're suppressing. And then for our housing retrofit project, the data comes from retrofit contractors. And we found out in the linkage process that they have their own unique property reference system. So the data that was provided didn't actually have the standardized UPRNs, so we didn't make any matches. And also that we don't have any information on the match scores for that process. So I guess that's an additional thing to think about in terms of the quality of matches. We probably have much more information now about the address quality, so the address matching quality for our health data, than we do maybe for some of the other data sets that we're bringing in. And then I've got here time. Both of these projects has taken so long to get the metrics in that we would like to do and to use and to do the data linkage. So yeah, that's just another thing to factor in our project. So I think I might have been speaking for more than 20 minutes, and I'm really sorry. So please get in touch if you'd like to learn more about our project, please, and our websites are up there. Yeah, thank you very much.
Fab. Thank you very much, Anna. That's perfect. I think you're perfectly on time. I think you're slightly under 20 minutes, so fab.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. So if everybody can hold their questions and thoughts, especially on those things that Anna posed to us about what are risks and around information governance, things like that, but in this sphere. Until after Rodri speaks, that'd be great. So I will hand over to Rodri, and we look forward to your talk.
Great, thank you. Can you see my slides and hear me okay?
Yep. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Anna, for that talk. That's really interesting. My name is Rodri Johnson. I'm a research analyst, data analyst. I worked in SAIL for about 10 or so years. I haven't done lots of thank yous to people like Anna did, so I'll do that out the way now. So I work in SAIL. The original people who were really involved, David Ford, Karina Jones and Ronan Lyons, all recently retired, but they're still around, and we're using a lot of their work and infrastructure they've created over the years. Also, especially in this area, mentioned to Sarah Rogers and Rich Fry, both very much involved in the GIS and the additional linkage and the creation of the RALF, the residential anonymized linkage field, which we use in SAIL. and also Simon Thompson, who's now one of the main directors in SAIL, and also Mike, who's on the call, who's taken the linkage forward. So those things out of the way. Also, DCHW do all are our trusted third party who do all the linkage at individual level and for the residential linkage. Right, so I got that out of the way. Okay, so this talk is more about a study I've been doing in the SAIL Bank in one of my projects, looking at loneliness and living alone, where we've used admin data and linked survey data for Wales. Oops. So this work was completed under the project that I'm the research lead of, which is the health and wellbeing theme of ADR Wales, which is funded by ESRC. The team for the paper that we've submitted, myself, Stuart Bedson, Rowena Bailey, Richard Fry, and Lucy Griffiths, all at Swansea University. Okay, quick note, this work is under review for publication, so please don't share anything. And I've not included all the results, I've included parts of it really. So, but the paper hopefully will be out, I'd say soon, but in this world, it could be a long time, who knows. Okay, so loneliness, social isolation, and living alone. Loneliness is a subjective state, perceived social deficit typified by feelings of isolation. It's a major public health concern with a multitude of physical and mental health adverse outcomes. Many things you could mention. Social isolation is an objective lack of social contacts and relationships. Markers include a reduction in social networks, reduction in social contacts, and living alone. Living alone, an objective measure associated with loneliness and isolation. The three fit together, related but not interchangeable, all considered to be determinants of adverse health, with increased societal and health costs, a burden on the population. This is where SAIL comes in with the living alone measure. As we have the registration data, we can go towards creating that variable from the address data. And luckily in SAIL, unlike what Anna was saying, we do have historical address histories. It comes with all those health warnings and limitations, but it's better than not having it, I guess. So I guess the key measures, looking at those, we've got loneliness and living alone. We have the measure type, loneliness subjective, living alone objective. The data sources I've used in this work, for loneliness, it's the National Survey of Wales, and for living alone, it's using the Welsh Demographic Service, WDS, which is the health-based address registration data. Sample size for National Survey of Wales is around, 12,000 people annually, whereas Wales, it's the population of Wales, and it's longitudinal, whereas obviously the survey is cross-sectional. So different advantages for both. The actual measure used from National Survey of Wales, it's rich, it's validated, it's been used in many studies. It's the De Jong-Gierveld with subscales of emotional and social loneliness and overall, whereas the living alone measure we can create with the data in SAIL, it's binary. Are you living alone? Yes or no? At point in time, but it's crude. In terms of implementation, the survey is harder. You've got to actually do the surveys, lots of work. Within WGS, the data's there, it's updated regularly. So once that's in place, using it to create these kind of measures is relatively simple. It obviously takes time. And then in terms of the usability for population health research, living alone is kind of underused in population health studies that I've seen. I've been using SAIL for a long time. It's only relatively recently I've started using it more, and I've looked around and it's not used as a common factor, and it's quite an easy factor to be included. And we've done a fair amount of housing-based studies that do include it now. Obviously, the key strength, it's longitudinal and it's population level. You can create metrics, you can create tracking over time, things like that. But the thing with it, it's crude. So this work I was looking at was whether we could devise a more nuanced living alone measure using that data with some creativity. So the study phases an approach. Phase 1, looking at the living alone trends, just using the full population, using mid-year snapshots, so as at 30th of June every year from 2008 to 2024, create the living alone trends. And whilst this is just descriptive, to me it's also, these are the kind of things that are actually useful for policymakers and say, oh, actually, how many people are living alone? Is it going up? Is it going down? We've also done work on household composition, and you can apply the same kind of thing. You can, is a 3-family type of family increasing, decreasing? These have impacts across obviously lots of different aspects of society. And then after creating the snapshot data, examine the social associations between living alone and the demographics using logistic models. Phase 2 is around developing those living alone reason indicators and duration of living alone. And then phase 3, bringing that data together, linking it with the National Survey for Wales survey data, survey waves 2016 to 22, linking that data up and then looking at the risk of loneliness across different scales based on living alone and various risk factors that we've partly from National Survey for Wales, partly from derived data just using SAIL. So just a quick, I haven't given an awful lot of detail about how the linkage works in SAIL and stuff. Years ago, I'd have done it every time, but I kind of assume people know. But effectively, we've got that trusted third party with DCHW. That data is brought into SAIL in a safe and anonymized way on a regular basis. I'm looking specifically at the address registration records in WDS, but that also kind of includes the individual level, which includes gender, week of birth, that kind of stuff as well. So this is just a quick slide for an example. So we've got a one-person example. We've got the person, which is known as the ALF, anonymized linkage field. So that 111166, same person every time. The household is the Ralph, and this is showing that person has moved from 4 addresses. The first one in April 1980, moved out in 2002, etc., etc. The green line carries on in a second, but that just shows the longitudinal nature of the address history for one person, and that's how the data is kind of structured. And there's that one record that I'll be using going forward. So adding in additional people, we've got that same person, their address history, and then suddenly in April 2005, and Mr. 222777 also moves in or registers with the GP, and then we've got those people in the data set. And then on the right hand side, I haven't highlighted it, but lives alone flag, yes, lives alone, yes, lives alone. Then when Mr. 222 comes in, person's no longer living alone, they're living with somebody, but then later on they're living alone again. So once we've got this data in this format, you can mess about with it any kind of way you want to create variables, track history, link it to exposures, etc. for different types of studies. But in this one, it's just looking at living alone over time. So once you've got the data, you can select all the people, count how many people were living alone or registered to a property in Wales. A quick SQL statement, and you've got a count for the number for 2006, and you can just play with that. Repeat, tweak, repeat. I've done this for a long time. I've made a living out of grouping by Ralph and repeating things, but it's very useful. So living alone data creation methods, bit of a repeat, but effectively we've got the address registration data, start and end dates for each person, anonymized households and identifiers. Simple to group it and classify and count. Group the data at household level, count the number of residents, create the living alone flag at individual level data. One resident, person lives alone, simple. Create the one resident, not living alone. Repeat. There's different ways you can do it. You can do it at a fixed time interval. I've used snapshot for this, but in other studies I've used a survey data explicitly and moved that along with different times. But yeah, this work was just annual snapshot. Then once you've got the data into that format you want it, any variables, you can then start playing and creating, analyzing, describing, whatever it is you're going to do. So that's what I did. These are the living alone trends and by some key demographics. So top right hand chart, please note the truncated y-axis. Overall, percentage of households that are classed as living alone from 2008 to 2024 increases by a couple of percent, up to just below 30, which is not an inconsiderable amount when you think about it in terms of how any policies that look at household and living alone. So living alone, the mean across that time is around 28% of all households. Then looking at age, the older people as a percentage seem to be dropping. Yeah, I'm not postulating the reasons why. We could go into that for a while, but and the younger population, which are 16 to 30, increasing since around 2016, and the other age ranges marginally increases. In terms of gender, females seem pretty flat in terms of the proportion of households that contains a female that are living alone, whereas males are on an increase, 3 or 4% over that period. Again, trends useful. Whilst people don't necessarily always like descriptives, they're useful. It starts to paint the picture, I guess. A bit more detail. So this is for 1 year, 2024. Living alone households, 363,000. Total households in Wales, around 1.2 million. 29% living alone. Nice pie chart, because I know how everyone loves a pie chart in the academic world. So then we looked across age and gender as part of an SS model, obviously a typo there, as part of a logistic model for the risk of living alone, adjusted for the main effects of deprivation, house type, region and rurality, the ONS, with the interaction between age and gender. So we have a reference group of males aged 16 to 30, males in the red, females in the blue. So for example, the red line, generally males have a lower risk of living alone up until they reach 76 plus, and for females that's kind of different. The females' lowest odds are 31 to 45, and then from that point up, from that age onwards, they increase relative to the males aged 16 to 30 after adjusting for all those main effects, where they are around 5 times the odds of living alone compared to the younger males. Okay, so that's phase 1, creating that data, visualizing it, doing various statistics just to find out what's going on. Phase 2 was to create the reasons for living alone, the more nuanced approach. So living alone, again, crude measure. We rarely observe why someone lives alone, even in survey data. Survey scores capture loneliness scores and various things, but to my knowledge, they don't actually capture the reason or duration for living alone, and it's certainly not captured in admin data. So can we take advantage of that, use the longitudinal nature of the address type data and work out those kind of things? The general approach I took, it was more detailed than this, but effectively it boiled down to is someone, why are they living alone? We know they're living alone at a certain point in time. Their partner or co-residents, what's happened to them? Have they passed away? Have they gone to a care home? Have they just separated in terms of different houses now? We don't have the detail to say it's a divorce or it's a split up, but we know they've moved house, and we know if the target individual who's living alone, whether they've moved out or whether other people have left them. So there's some nuance in there as well. And also including and combining the duration of living alone with some of these variables. So I guess we move from a crude who lives alone to how do they get there and for how long have they lived alone. Reasons approach. So we create the annual population data. Similar as before, we've got the address data for 1 year in this example, and just to show that we're looking at the whole data set. So from the start of the file, number 1, up to individual number 3.1 million, whoever that is. We select someone who's living alone as a target person, as an example. Earlier example, in 2016, yes, they were living alone. They were age 75 and they were female. We then search back over time and find the most recent non-living alone period. So this person was living alone in 2016, search back through that data, when were they last living with somebody else? So this is the data. When you bring those two people together, we found the most recent record. the period was 2014. And we're going to select the co-residence, which is that person. Let's just assume he's Mr. number 22777, male, 74. You could assume they're married or whatever, but they live together, the co-residence. Excuse me a second. So now we know who that person was living with in the previous period. And this is, bear with me with this. So then once we've got that, we've got the people from before, we need to find out information about that person. How do we do that? Then we go, we're going back to the future. So we're actually going from the past and then skipping forward to see what's happened to them. Sorry for the corny, just to bring in some little bit of lightheartedness. So we're asking what's back to the future, what's happened to that co-resident? With the data that we have available, what can we say? Have they died? Have they gone to a care home? Have they had a house change or a Ralph change? And then once we've got that data into a relevant format, we got, so for this example, that's sadly Mr. 222 passed away in February 2016, obviously fictitious data. Once we got that data into this kind of format, we can then apply some rules. Was there a death or movement to a care home? It's a partner loss, bereavement. Is there a Ralph household change? It's a separation of some sort, or it could be non-assigned. There's missing data, or you just can't create that reason. And also then calculate the living alone reason. Okay, so living alone reason results. We have for 2024 only 20% of the people living alone in 2024 were due to partner loss. 18% were due to the cohabitant being deceased, 2% going to a care home. The majority, 57%, due to a separation, and again, split then by whether the individual has moved or the co-resident has moved. And then we have 23% or so non-assigned for various reasons. And I've split that by whether they're a new entrant to WDS, which an equivalent is of a new entrant to Wales, if we interpret that correctly, or they've been in Wales for a long time and for whatever reason, maybe missing the household information. We just don't know. That's where it gets blind, I guess. And then you can just chuck that stuff together, trends over 12 or so years and different granularities. I've got a lot more granularity. This is the kind of collapsed one. Okay, I'm really taking a lot of time. So moving on to phase 3, this is actually linking the data, using it for the actual study outcomes. So cohort creation, National Survey for Wales data, waves 2016-17 to 21-22, excluded in 2017 as there was no loneliness data recorded. So we start off with 58,000 records. We would exclude those that aren't matched at the individual level, low confidence matches, or no linkage, which actually is what we get for individuals, but not for household linkage, which is obviously useful information here. Then a further reduction will be link it to that spine, and then finally some further exclusions for covariates, and then a final analytical cohort of around 50,000 records relating to 43,000 people. They changed the survey methods in 2021 with COVID, allowing repeat measures and online interviews, etc. Outcome scores. So it's I said about this before, the de Jong-Gierveld 6-item score. Emotional scales such as I miss having people around. There's 3 questions in that frame. Social, 3 questions. For example, there are many people I can trust completely. Sum the scores greater than equals 2 is classified as lonely for the subscales, or greater than 4 for the overall measure. The risk factors, very briefly, the living alone, as we've discussed, general demographics, social SES and housing, so how tenure, housing type, area level deprivation, age, ethnicity, education, health, general health, and long-term illness. Generally in SAIL, I would look at the linked health records. For this study, I just used the National Survey for Wales data as it would have taken a lot more time than we had available. And then finally, some geographical and some built environment metrics that we use a lot. I haven't talked about them in detail. So region, rurality, greenness, NDVI, and the active living environment, ALE. An additional living alone classification was to combine the partner loss or bereavement by the recency or duration of living alone. So less than or equal to 2 years where someone's lost their partner, less than 5 years or greater than 5 years. And then modelled all that data with the loneliness outcome scores for each of the scales, with all those risk factors modelling the odds of being self-reported loneliness. So do those living alone report more loneliness? So it's a simple descriptive chart, describes whether those who live alone are more likely to report loneliness. So for emotional loneliness, yes, they do. 32% of people living alone report loneliness, compared to 20% who are not living alone. Similar pattern for social and overall, but less of a gap between the two. This kind of thing often just seems so obvious that it would be like this, but I guess we're demonstrating the association using this data, providing evidence. And I think so, especially I guess using linked admin data and survey data. And it supports the use of living alone as a factor in studies. Yes, there is a difference there. This is something useful which could be important for health, etc. Lots of links there. So the final adjusted model results. So we've got the estimated odds of loneliness, adjusted models, all covariates, including the age, gender, interaction again, but only excerpts really. So this is we've got the 3 types of loneliness. This is the living alone reason. We've got on the left, we've got the unassigned group, separation, and then we've got the 3 loss of partner with the additional duration of living alone, and then the reference group of not living alone. And you can see quite clearly there's a gradual increase in reported loneliness for people who've lost their partner more recently, and there's increased odds for all of the people living alone compared to non-living alone. Especially for the emotional loneliness, the models were developed on that scale and repeated across the other 2. So there's less of a pattern for the social loneliness, but again, it's after adjusting for all the covariates, there's still a link between loneliness and living alone, and then I guess the overall gets kind of squashed between the 2. So increased adjusted odds of living loneliness if living alone. For living alone reasons, if you live alone, all scales increases. Recency of partner loss. So a recent loss within 2 years, 4 times higher the odds of reporting self-reported loneliness, compared to 2 times higher odds of loneliness if you've lost a partner, but it's been 5+ years. And then one other one just to show in terms of health and long-term illness, we have. Sorry, my thing's gone wrong. Okay, I'll come back to that now. Okay, so we've got, so for health, bad health compared to good or very good health, 4 times the odds of reporting loneliness. And for fair health compared to good or very good, twice or 2 times the odds of reporting loneliness. And for long-term illness, it's around 1.4, 1.5 times the odds compared to someone who doesn't have a long-term illness. Again, I guess just evidence in that link between health, loneliness, living alone, it's all linked up. Less obvious patterns, again, as I've said, across social and overall. And then just, I think this is the final slide to do with the study. So this is just showing loneliness across the life course, and this is the interaction between age and gender, whilst accounting for all the other factors, social, age, etc. So we've got, for the overall, there's a steady decline with self-reported loneliness from, again, the reference group is the younger males, but in this case, both females and males have a similar trend, downwards reporting of loneliness, less than half the odds for people who are 76+. For emotional loneliness, females have the elevated odds compared to males. Again, it's similar downward pattern with some divergence towards older ages. And I guess perhaps the interesting bit in this is that for social loneliness, this pattern is reversed, and males have a higher self-reported loneliness, and actually that danger age, middle-aged males often linked to higher rates of suicide and self-harm, etc. Loneliness, all linked in. That's kind of showing some kind of signal there. So that, I think, is the end of the study slides. Just some very quick reflections on the use of address data. So it's all underpinned by the address level data, the correctness and accuracy. But we have no current visibility downstream to be able to make any choices on which data we could include. But it's amazingly useful. Further detail, confidence would help. Potential issues for incorrect address registrations, and Anna touched on quite a few of these. It's different in different populations, etc. We looked at linkage of WDS to census data in Sale, and there are systematic differences in linkage, for example, younger people, renters, etc. So address quality shapes the research outputs when we're using them. Greater transparency would be great. Generally improve the classifications, etc. But to close, live alone is a process, not a state. So trying to talk about not just the binary flag, and address data really does determine how we can observe that process and use this data in a kind of creative way to add rich data already to that data. Yeah, sorry, that was about ending, but yeah, that's me. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, both Anna and Rodri. That was it's really excellent to see just the sort of interesting analyses that can only be accomplished with the sort of address-based linkage that you've demonstrated there. And I'm sure we all sympathise with the time it takes for these linkages to occur. So I appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing about the results of those two projects in due course. And hopefully you come back and speak to us. So I guess with that, if you do have any questions, please do put your hands up. I think Joe's already jumped in there, so I'll let Joe ask a question. So.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really enjoyed both of the presentations, and in particular the power of UPRNs. Like, it gives you information not just on the environment, the geo predictors, but in Rodri's project also the social elements and people movements. I suppose I have two key questions. One is about the governance of it, that probably more relevant for Anna's presentation. So this is mostly about disclosure, and you've talked about having to use different rules of censoring as you change your analyses. And I'm wondering if there's a sort of harmonized approach into dealing with that. I know Abigail is on the call, and Abigail's been leading a lot of work in similar issues in the UK longitudinal linkage collaboration, for example. And I think, well, what would you say is the next step forward to solve these problems?
I'll jump in very quickly.
Yes, please.
Whilst I've used the kind of data like this, I've got quite a lot of experience of actually messing about with the JS data to try and do exactly this with Rich, Fry, and Amy. It's difficult. We've been trying to use EPT data in a safe way. That whole thing that Anna talked about, not allowing unique combinations of records, it's difficult. So yeah, and Sale has done all this over a number of years. It's still perhaps refining stuff, but yeah, we've had a lot of experience with it. But I just want to make sure that we've dealt with this in Sale and are still dealing with it. It's an ongoing thing. But yeah, sorry Anna, I jumped in. You go ahead.
Yeah, it would be great to hear the approach within like the UK longitudinal linkage collaboration as well. I guess for us, this is mainly determined by, at the moment, the commissioning support unit that does all the governance for the data that we are using. So yeah, their approach is that we should not have disclosive data as we're putting environmental data in, and I think that goes through various NHS governance committees that I can never remember the name of. They've all got like acronyms like CDEG and CAG, and yeah, I'm not sure what each one does, but yeah, I think it would be good to understand how other places are doing it. Thank you.
Would you like to jump in, Abigail?
Yes, hello. Yeah, so at UK LLC, we use sort of a risk assessment approach where we try to balance utility and risk. So it's sort of shaped in three different areas. So one of them is more general questions around risk. And I do like your example, Anna. Usually I use the example of the Isle of Scilly and the EPC records, but I did love that lighthouse example. But looking at, is there low counts in specific geographies? So for UPRN, would be looking at low counts in certain local authorities. We also, as part of the risk assessment, have questions such as, do boundary changes lead to disclosure? So yeah, we're taking sort of a holistic approach.
Mm. Thanks, Abigail. I feel like there's another full-on discussion from this topic. Perhaps we could organize our next webinar on exactly this. I think a related question is about encryption. So I think one thing that I didn't realize, but only learned when Anna was saying, was, well, different groups may have their own encryption and their own interpretation or rendition of UPRNs. Well, there's Ralph and Wells, and there's sort of different ways of linking through ONS and NHS. And what do you think is a sort of a balanced way forward? Do we need a third sector or a different independent organization that helps unify and handle UPRN processing, or what is the way forward to not fall into the same traps as you might have?
I think that, yeah. I'm not going to do the classic thing of not particularly answering the question, but I suppose like in this case, it's partly around like understand, when we're asking people for data and people are providing data, like making sure that we all understand each other. I think like maybe it was just a misunderstanding, and I think this is Roger, you mentioned Sarah Rogers, so she's also on this project, and I think when she did their housing project in Wales in like 2014, they had a similar problem, that the UPRNs that were provided were not the UPRNs that Ordnance Survey use. So I guess some of it is around like data quality control and like checking that we all understand each other. Yeah, I guess if there was a unified process, that would be great, but I don't know. I think getting everybody to agree on exactly the same thing is impossible, whatever you're doing.
No, thanks. I appreciate that. So, is it Ave?
Aves.
Avis. Sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Thanks for making that sound French. Yeah, I'm the custodian of the One Scotland Gazetteer in Scotland at the Improvement Service. The whole thing about pseudo UPRNs kind of irks me, if I'm honest with you. So there's like a default UPRN, and there's also ones that OS generate, which is their UPRN, but I'm very kind of like hard-coded about it, that there's a default ID, and once we start bringing this idea of a pseudo UPRN, then you're back to kind of watering down the benefit of it. Yeah, local government for about 2 decades now has leveraged the UPRN across housing, social, education. They're kind of ahead of the curve, to be honest. It's a surprising thing to say, and they've derived the benefits. They've now stitched together data sets. They have a customer, and it's all via information governance, but they now have a default customer view across local authorities now. So your old local authority might have a thing where you pop in your address, it tells you what day your bin collection is, what council area you're in, your school catchment area, It's a UPRN. So you have to kind of take the legit one, it will come from your local gazetteers or an ordnance survey, but leverage it. Don't start introducing this idea for the other people if you want to do pseudo UPRNs. I'll say what I said to a data camp gov in Scotland. Everybody on this call, technically, we're the good guys, right? The public want us working together because in the background, we all know Google, Facebook, etc. are doing everything they want without any oversight with the data. Everybody on this call, without checking who's all our eye knows, here working for the public good. So the idea that we're putting our hands behind our backs, yeah, when our kind of first line business is helping the public, yeah. So I kind of wish people would kind of take up that type of approach rather than being on the back foot slightly, because I'm happy to defend what I do and why I do it and how I go about it.
No,
Rant over.
That's fair. I totally appreciate your perspective of this. I think I do agree that it's. I absolutely know what you mean about local authorities being ahead of the curve of this. And UPRNs are a thing, right? They've been specified, they've been adopted. It's part of the government, geospatial. It's why are people saying they've got UPRNs when they're not UPRNs when they pseudo them? But I think this is I think, as Joe said, this is definitely a scope for an information governance session around this. But I want to get to Jonathan's question. Sorry, Jonathan, I know you've been waiting patiently, so I'll just let you ask your question.
No, thank you. So I work at Policy and Practice, where we do a lot of data linkage using mainly between benefits data sets and other external data sets. Usually what we have available is addresses and personal identifiers. But I was just wondering, when you're doing address-based linkages only, how, I know that Anna mentioned earlier that obviously there are these issues where there are delays in updating addresses and so on. Do we just take that, do we just sort of take the data at face value, and I don't know, obviously there are going to be some errors there, or I don't know, are there any sort of strategy for dealing with that? On Rodri's side, the National Survey for Wales seems like it would have personal identifiers that they would be linking within SAIL, but is that sort of accounted for in the RALF, or would you be able to use the ALF to link people in a more robust way, given that these sort of address data issues?
That's great. It's a good question. Two good questions. I'm worried about time here, but if people like to stay on, that's great. But just for those who have to leave, just see those comments that Ludi's put in there about feedback survey would be great, and do join our mailing list on that email address. But if Anna and Rodri have time, and then anybody else who wants to stay on, Anna, perhaps you could take that first point about what you're doing about just taking the fact that you've only got one address. And then we can take that second point, Rodri, if you can.
Yeah, so this is something we're discussing at the moment, because we were hoping we would at least have the current address when somebody moved in there, and we don't have that. So it is tricky. I think it does depend on the question, and we're sort of working through that at the moment in terms of, one of the solutions we're maybe looking at is, could we pick a date and say we're interested in asthma outcomes in 2024, could we ask for a derived field that is, did this person live at this current address at the end of 2023, so that we have some sense of how, have they lived there for that whole year or not, without having that. It's the date that people moved in that is currently the sort of the governance issue. So we're really talking about that at the moment. So I can't give an answer. I'm sorry. It's a problem in progress.
We will ask you back to say how you've dealt with that for sure. Rodri, do you want to take the second point about the data available within?
Yeah, just clarify the question again. Sorry.
Jonathan, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry. So in the NSW data, is there personal identifiers available as well? Like was SAIL able to link using personal identifiers as well as the address linkages?
Yes. So in National Survey of Wales, they provide the ALF, the personal identifier. So you can link that in SAIL to whatever you've got access to according to the governance. So you can link it to all their actual health data, WGS individual level. You then link that to the address the address registration contains each person's address history, which contains the RALF, the household, and the person. So you can link it into that. You can look at where they lived at any point in time, given the limitations of people not updating their addresses, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it all flows through nicely like that. And again, I think we kind of forget how lucky we've been in SAIL. We've been doing this for a long time, and we hear some of these stories and like, oh, we've been doing that for ages, but perhaps we don't shout about it enough, or things have moved on and there's different ways of doing it. It's not my kind of area, but yeah, no, we're very lucky to have had Sale.
Yeah, I think Sale has a lot of experience in this area and has developed a lot of pragmatic information governance policies. Same in Scotland, it's speak to as adversary as well. I think I'm going to draw it to a close there because we're already running late. I will send out some updates via our email list because I think a lot of people have already left. But thank you very much, Anna and Rodri. Again, some really fabulous talks, and we look forward to welcoming people to another webinar soon. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Cheers all.
Cheers.
Bye.